Welcome to Charts This Week, Global Markets. Really quite a big recovery in stock markets last week. So really just looking at the implications of what that now means. So have we seen the low? Is the trend back on? Let's take a look at it. Here we see the monthly chart. Not a lot of change on this picture. We saw the lagging line close out in February just slightly above the cloud, but really we'd need to see a few months to be confident that this is a long-term trend breakout. So really we had bullish, congested. We were bullish really until the 2007-8 crisis, where we came below the cloud. This is really markets in long-term congestion. So even though we think about the trend in the daily chart, we do see that changes quite considerably when we look at the monthly chart. And here we do see the daily and in fact the weekly cloud overlaid, and we tested really right on the cloud base on the daily. So really quite key that we came right back to the cloud base to the point 1249 was the point level, and that's where we tested. And then if we look at the where we've moved to, we closed on Friday, we closed last week really at the top of the cloud. So we've come into the cloud on the price, tested the bottom of the cloud, testing the top. It could be a little bit of a bearish sign, that, because you come back, you've tested support, then you're finding resistance. Just need to be careful of a seesawing out of the cloud. That's what we've got to watch out for this week. But in terms of the lagging line, we're above the cloud. We're still bullish on the daily chart. The 60-minute chart had a fantastic run on the S&P, and here we see how we were below the cloud. This was the bearish zone, the uncertainty. We touched on the daily cloud. This is the daily cloud overlaid. We're back through on the 60-minute chart. So really is quite key that. But a lot of congestion and noise after this move. New high, of course, is what we want to see for the trend to be continuing. And if we take out this low that we saw at 1249, that would be worrying. The 10x3 chart, we had targets to 1300 on the point and figure. The 1100 is the downside target if we go lower than what we saw at that 1249, or 1260 in fact. So we've got to just watch for a move back to those, test those lows, because that would activate further downside. And we see in fact on the 5-minute chart, intraday we did get to this 1250 target that was given. We have a shortage of new targets at the moment. So really quite key, we would need to see this thrust move. Will it give us a new upside target? The 1% chart, this is a 1% log scale. It just resolves the fact that the price moves very dramatically, so the box size varies in percentage terms. 1344 was the target there, given and met. Do have a downside of 1146. So again, if we make new lows, it's suggesting another 100 points downside. So we just need to be aware of that. We do still have these targets hanging over us that have been made from that thrust off the high. But here is the 1-minute chart. We had 1322 kicking in. On Monday last week, we had 1346. That was a target that was given. And then on Thursday, we had 1339. So we have got upside targets that have been given, but watch out for new price action developing here this week. That's really what's quite key. If we look at the breadth, this is the S&P 500 index members, bullish percent. So here's the trend breach. Still a little bit worried about that. And then we see that the breadth hasn't really recovered strongly either. So signs are it's still a little bit early to say that we've put in the low at the base of the cloud and we're now running again. We really have got the high hanging over us and the threat of a lower low. The Dow chart, 10,500 is the thrust down if we make new lows. 12.4 was what we met. An absence of new upside targets at the moment. We need new buying thrust to give us that. And the 60-minute chart on the Dow, very similar to the S&P. We're through in the cloud, as you would expect. If we look at the 1-minute targets, so this is a 10x3 chart, 1-minute targets, 12,360, 12,550, and 12,460. Much the same sort of levels the S&P's been projecting targets. So really quite key. Watch for new price action here on the Dow this week. Nasdaq, this 38.2% level has been giving us quite a bit of trouble, around 2,300. But and tech has been outperforming. But really quite interesting. It's not looking quite as bearish as perhaps some of the other markets. We didn't come back. We did go a little bit below on the price here. Notice how the lagging line found support on the cloud. This trend's still pretty much in track, but just a little bit later perhaps if we are seeing a sell-off here. The lagging line not yet through. So we've just got to be careful on watching all of these. Russell 2000 index, showing strength. So US small caps, relative strength is fantastic. US small caps look like they're really going to try and test this level. And if we look at that, what's interesting is 1,290 is the new upside target. We need to break above 840 to activate that, and of course we're going to see resistance around this 850 level. But really a new upside buying thrust in the Russell 2000. We're seeing small caps giving a buying thrust that we're not seeing in the broader market, so really quite fascinating. We look to Europe now. We look at FTSE. The FTSE chart, we're above on the cloud. This is the weekly cloud, so we're still in the long-term trend. And testing how we see here how support resistance has sort of become support, this line of action of about 5,800. We do see underperformance on FTSE, a little bit of a concern. And then if we look at the 50 by 3 chart, 6,500 is the upside target. Got good trend support in place. But if we go to a 25 by 3 chart over here, we see the box size, 25 by 3, 7,000. We see the 6,100 target that was given way back at 5.2 met. 7,069, that's clustering to that level. But we do have this little downside target of 5,625 was met, slightly exceeded. And of course, if we make a new low, that's pushing us right back to 4,800. I'm slightly concerned as we go into the seasonality effect with FTSE, where we're hitting the May period. We're hitting this period so that if we do go lower, we do then activate those targets. So we might have a little bit of a, April might be okay, but if we do get a sell-off in May that takes us lower than that low that we've just seen, that does activate the downside, and we could see the market selling off over the summer. So the seasonality is something to keep a quite close eye on, and we're through on both the lagging line and the price on FTSE, which we haven't seen in the US market. So the FTSE is looking a little bit more bearish. And look at the DAX. Here we see the upside target of 8,750, downside of 4,850 if we go lower. Very similar picture to FTSE. If we go lower, we activate the downside. And then the CAC actually, quite interestingly, hasn't had that sort of level of thrust. It's been really quite tight on this trend. So CAC has actually stood up quite well. Upside targets, it's one of the better looking European markets at the moment. If we look at the Nikkei, Nikkei long term, this is the monthly cloud chart. Not many people would look at a monthly chart, but the monthly cloud just highlights we're still getting off the catastrophic effect of the market falling all this time, and then of course the catastrophic effect of all the situation with the tsunami has just not helped with the sentiment of this chart. In line with this, we're in bearish mode already, and now the really big question is, can we hold this floor? And if we look at the daily chart, the daily and weekly charts overlaid here, we've gone from being on one side of these to the other. Really now these clouds will create probably quite a bit of pressure, and we do have down selling thrusts. We already had one in place for 5,900, but since the tsunami we've had another selling thrust, not activated yet. We need a new low, but 4,500, it's really hard to imagine. We come from 39,000, but that's really what we're looking at. So really not a great picture in Japan. The Australian market, quite interesting. We're above on the cloud, but really just struggling to make any headway here. For a good year and a half, we've been really testing this 5,000 level, 5,030, and again, we just tested the cloud, but really flat lining here on the Australian market, and we're seeing the underperformance. Aussie dollar making new record highs. We're seeing targets up to 114 on the Aussie dollar on the point and figure charts. So really, this is probably weighing quite heavily on the Australian stock market. The Indian market finding support last week on the cloud, still quite an exciting looking market. Basing pattern, unlike the big range that we're seeing in Western markets, this does have some upward momentum to it. Big resistance at 21,000, that's what we need to see to break. Here we see the relative trend. It's really been outperforming quite spectacularly. And Brazil, really quite interesting. One of the other BRIC countries, of course, the B in the BRIC. And here we see how we've really found support on the cloud, testing this previous high. Really not many more months to go, or weeks to go really. This is a weekly candle. We could be testing this. We're coming to a point where it's getting interesting for Brazil. So one chart to really watch. That's it for this week. I'm always happy to cover any charts you like. Just send me an email and I'll do my best. Until next week, happy charting. See you then.